It's a new day on the nicked Jem'Hadar ship we're piloting, and one that's going badly. The repairs we need after our sabotage mission went pear-shaped are going to take longer than we've got due to some incoming ships who are very unhappy with us. We scarper into some space fog as they start pooping at us, a kaboom on the bridge injuring Dax. The pursuing ships don't fancy following us, which is probably wise given that our reward for going in is to crash land on a planet. We're not the first either, as a couple of Jem'Hadar lads are having a chat on a cliff about how they crashed here too. One's in charge, so let's drag out the wheel of names and give him a label of our own. We'll be calling him Mr. Bob Dobalina, offered by Commander Tom. Mr. Bob Dobalina's not technically the Jem'Hadar first, but as both the first and the second have carked it, he's the one in charge. Probably anyway, as he disagreed with their Vorta about entering the space fog to begin with, and whilst he was clearly proven right, such independence of thought is frowned upon. Maybe the Vorta will be more inclined to let it go, given how badly he was injured by his own error. Speaking of injuries, Dax is doing okay despite the rather unfortunate landing we made. The same cannot be said of our ship, as that's in the process of becoming a submarine, though we managed to get some odds and sods from it before we left. The Jem'Hadar are in much the same situation. The Vorta is in bad shape, but still well enough to be pissed off at Mr. Bob Dobalina. Hearing it'll take at least 10 days to get their phone working doesn't help, a fact likely connected to their limited supply of Ketracel White. Being provided only a single vial by the Vorta has one of the Jem'Hadar concerned until Bob shuts him up. The Vorta tells them not to worry with all the heartfelt sincerity of a career politician. Our lot have made their own cave home and are currently drying off from their unexpected swim. Bashir's had a chance to treat Dax at least and patched her up as best he can. He's prescribed bed rest, which is a mixed blessing when her bed is a rock. Still, at least it means she doesn't have to forage like the others. Eggnog having to find food and water with plain simple Garak is bad enough, what with their unpleasantness last year, and that's without them being captured by Jem'Hadar. We're having a bit of the old interrogating, not that Eggnog is inclined to comply. Plain simple Garak's going the other way and providing plenty of information, all of it false, until the Vorta catches him in a lie. All's forgiven when plain simple Garak tells him we have a doctor, his honest answer likely prompted by seeing the Vorta's injuries. Mr. Bob Dobalina is tasked with finding the rest of us, but specifically to only gather data and report back. Let's catch up with Terok Nor, shall we? Jake's not wasting time waiting for his interview with 5th Uncle Wayoon the Creepy, and is instead holding one with Kira and Odo. News of a Vorta delegation soon to visit Bajor has leaked. They say it's to offer technical help given the lack of trade caused by the Dominion presence, but Jake's quoting a Vedek who claims it's the start of an invasion in all but name. Learning that the Vedek intends to hold a demonstration here on the station has Kira and Odo worried about repercussions from Seagull Dukat. Kira's comment about talking to the Vedek in question has Jake suggesting she's removing the right to peaceful protest, which even he realizes was an error after Kira leaves. Back on the planet of the Tom Paris landings, the absence of Eggnog and plain simple Garak has been noticed, so we're out having a look. One of us notes we're being observed, and Sisko orders us to quietly spread out a bit, which is probably just as well when a Jem'Hadar loses it and starts pooping at us. A fighting ensues until Mr. Bob Dobalina gets things back under control and gives the lad in question a proper bollocking. Ordering him to cloak and bugger off reveals he can't cloak anymore, so they withdraw the old-fashioned way by legging it, a fact noted by O'Brien when he sees them. The Vorta's pissed off by the shambles, but Mr. Bob Dobalina refuses to say which of his lads fired first, as it's not for a Vorta to punish the rank and file. He lets it go eventually, and instead gives Bob a new task. Back on Terok Nor, Kira's chatting with the outspoken Vedek. They agree that the Dominion are a bunch of wankers, though Kira thinks antagonizing them is not the right call. The Vedek thinks Kira's wrong, that acceptance of the situation has turned her into a Dominion mouthpiece, and makes it clear that she still intends to demonstrate. Cisco is arranging defences against the Jem'Hadar when he receives word that one of them wants to have a chat with him. It's Mr. Bob Dobalina, and he's come to talk about eggnog and plain simple Garak. Specifically, he's come to say their Vorta will release them in exchange for Cisco and Bashir, a deal that Cisco points out is pretty dogshit from our perspective. Rather surprisingly, Bob Dobalina agrees with him and says he's only here to deliver the message, lying to Cisco about the tactical folly of it all apparently not being part of his orders. He's also been told to relay that Cisco and Bashir will be released afterwards, something Cisco doesn't find reassuring when coming from a Vorta. So he makes Bob himself give his word that they'll be released afterwards, and seems content when he's told that those were the orders Bob received. The point of Cisco's approach was to drive a wedge between Mr. Bob Dobalina and his Vorta, of course, something Dax notes after he's gone. Cisco's unconvinced it'll work, but it beats trying to fight them when we're outnumbered, and the trade going off without a hitch is a promising start. It's certainly more promising than events on Terok Nor. Kira and Odo are waiting for the Vedex demonstration, only to conclude it's not going to happen. It doesn't, at least not in the way they expect, as the Vedex demonstration is to call out the Dominion by taking a dive off a walkway with a rope around her neck. That's one even Bashir couldn't heal, so let's see what he can do with the Vorta instead, whose name we finally learn is Kievan. Immediate surgery is Bashir's diagnosis, and the Jem'Hadar all take an interest. The insides of a Vorta are something they've not experienced before. Kievan the Vorta, still being alive after Bashir's finished surgery, has him sufficiently impressed that he tells all the Jem'Hadar to bugger off so we can talk alone. Actually, the main reason he told the Jem'Hadar to leave is because he's being honest with us about having only one vial of Ketracel White left, after which the Jem'Hadar will be very pissed off indeed. That's why he's going to order them to attack us tomorrow, and provide us with their routes so we can ambush and kill them all. Then he'll surrender to us, we fix the phone he's got, and all of us can get the fuck off this planet. Given that the attack will happen whether we ambush the Jem'Hadar or not, Cisco thinks we don't have a lot of choice in the matter, despite how unpopular the idea of a massacre is with many of his troops. Kira's gone AWOL. Odo tells her Damar Dawson Biggs has spent 5 hours trying to call her, a fact for which she has zero shits to give. She's been thinking about everything and realised that back during the Cardigan occupation, she'd have called people doing what she's doing collaborators. Odo telling her neutrality is what Cisco wanted for them doesn't sway her. Having so many others fight for her freedom doesn't sit right, which is why she needs to start doing the same. Odo can see trying to dissuade her would be pointless, so off they go to plan the rebirth of the Bajoran resistance. As one fight starts, Cisco's trying to avoid another. He's decided to talk to Mr. Bob Dobalina and see if bloodshed can be avoided. He's thought about it too, offering to sedate the Jem'Hadar so they won't suffer Ketracel withdrawal and stick them in stasis after rescue. He even tells Bob that this ambush was Kievan's idea. Mr. Bob Dobalina already knew that latter point, or at least suspected. The plan was obviously flawed, and the logical conclusion was betrayal. It doesn't matter. Jem'Hadar are loyal. It's the way they were made. Cisco returns to the firing line just before Bob orders the charge. The exchange is over swiftly, but not without a loss on the side of the Federation. Still, we've gained a Vorta for the lads back home to interrogate, something the people in charge will likely consider a price worth paying, so we'll leave the remaining grunts to deal with cleaning up after other people's decisions. Until the next adventure. The Dominion War plods on, but this time with a look at the people affected, twin stories of what happens when you're involved and what happens when you aren't. The A-plot first, then, and another chance to look at the Jem'Hadar as more than simply monsters. Mr. Bob Dobalina does what he's told, certainly, but also acts outside of that. The initial meeting between Cisco and Bob serves as a great example. Kievan the Vorta clearly didn't intend for him to say it was a bloody awful deal and Cisco shouldn't take it, but he wasn't specifically forbidden from saying those things. This could simply be his default state, conditioned to respond to any question honestly unless otherwise ordered, but I think not. We've seen Jem'Hadar recognise other soldiers before, as shown towards O'Brien in Hippocratic Oath from Season 4, and I suspect Mr. Bob Dobalina appreciates on some level that they're all here because of somebody else's choices. Indeed, could that recognition of his own conditioning, knowing that he's the property of the Founders, grant him sympathy towards others who are forced to follow orders as he is, even if he himself accepts his situation? Like knows like. Bob's final act suggests the Jem'Hadar are ultimately what they were made to be: loyal, obedient, unwavering, unquestioning. But then we also have examples of that not being the case, don't we? Times when the programming and instinct made way to rational questioning of their place in the Dominion. Where does Mr. Bob Dobalina sit on this scale? More than that, are these behaviours simply Jem'Hadar reproduction errors, or a manifestation of something more inevitable? Rule of Acquisition 217 says you can't free a fish from water. The evolution of life on Earth from a few 100 million years ago, however, shows that quite a few fish disagreed with that rule. To the B-plot then, and possibly the more interesting of the two. A former resistance fighter realises she's now supporting the very thing she fought previously. On the surface at least, as it also raises the question of whether some of those she considered collaborators during the occupation were genuinely acting in what they believed were the best interests of her people. I wonder what the guy she murdered in the flashback episode of Season 2 thought of his own actions. Regardless, the purpose is to demonstrate how easy it is to accept fascism as the normal state of affairs, excusing one minor incursion after another and saying those who object are overreacting, until you wake up one day and realise what you've allowed to happen. It's a commentary not just on our own individual complacency, but also on how those in power can become detached from the reality of a situation. Kira might have thought she was hearing how Bajorans felt about the Dominion presence, but relayed reports will never provide the same perspective as when she was on the ground back in the day. There might even be a moral here about Starfleet admirals. A few little things to touch on then before we end this one. First is a point to whoever wrote the exchange between Eggnog and plain simple Garak. Star Trek's ever-present big red reset button is something I've complained about before, so seeing Eggnog not only reference prior events but actually learn from them is a delight, and the compliment from plain simple Garak perfectly in keeping with his character. Second is an update to Odo's office that I noticed in this episode. We've previously mentioned the changes his office has undergone throughout the seasons, the last of which left him with a bank of screens behind his desk, a replicator to the right as you face it, and a weapons case to the left. Some clever bugger realised it's a Starfleet weapons case and decided to remove it for Season 6 after the Federation withdrawal. A billion points to whoever picked up on that one, as it's precisely the sort of thing I love to see. Last, then, is a line that made me think about something I hadn't considered before. When O'Brien tears his trousers, because I refuse to believe he'd call them pants, a plain simple Garak tells him they tore on the seam. That popped a question into my head. If Starfleet uniforms are replicated, why do they have stitched seams? Why do any replicated items of clothing have seams for that matter? One uninterrupted piece of fabric would be stronger, surely. I can buy the idea of handmade or hand-altered clothes for personal use. It makes an element of sense in the same way that some people insist on cooking. But we know replicators make uniforms and other clothing from the pilot episode of Voyager. Having uniforms that can only be created through replication serves to limit who can access them as well, an important security consideration. Is this all massively overthinking something unimportant? Of course it is, that's what we do here, but it struck me as a good example of how our visions of the future will be tainted by the thinking of today in ways we don't always perceive. Another reminder, then, of just how difficult science fiction can be to write. End of episode.
Did we ever actually figure out what sparkle space is?
What do you mean?
Well, this is the teleport buffer, right? We're not supposed to be experiencing anything now because we're just a jumble of matter.
I thought we agreed not to try and apply logic to any of these, what with us being cartoon dogs and all.
Yeah, well, there's still gotta be rules. The universe of any story has to have a set of coherent guidelines so it makes sense to the viewer. Take ours, for example. We break the fourth wall on the reg, but it's still done in a way that makes it clear we're a separate and distinct place, removed from it all. We're on the border of trek and reality, if you like, not really existing in either, but able to dip our toes in both.
Is this what happens when you have too much spare time? You start to examine the nature of our existence?
Me brain's only got two speeds, mate. Metaphysics and I spy.
Fine. I spy, with my little eye, some...
Is it sparkles?
God damn it. Woof.